Well, hey everybody. Oh, wow, that's pretty loud. So we've got a good small room here, so you should be able to hear me pretty well. It looks pretty packed though. Let me introduce what we'll be talking about today. My name's Ben Meadowcroft. I work at VMware in our storage and availability PM team. We're going to talk a little bit about tech preview that we're sharing with our customers today of our disaster recovery with VMware Cloud on AWS. GS, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's GS Kalsa. I work in the technical marketing group for storage and availability, focused on availability, so all things site recovery manager, replication, things like that. If you're looking for spots in the back, there's plenty of seats up front, so you're welcome to stand at the back too. That's just fine. And why don't you walk us through our disclaimer?
Yes, so for every tech preview, there always has to be this slide. In fact, for every VMware session, it seems we put this slide here. But it does serve a very important purpose. This is a tech preview, and so please take a moment to read this disclaimer. This is something that we're sharing with you. We're showing you some of the ideas that we're working on, what our thought process is, but there isn't a commitment that we're going to deliver this in any specific time frame. So please just bear that in mind. We're sharing this with you in hopes that it'll be interesting, and you may have some feedback for us as well on what we're doing. But hopefully you find it useful, but please do read this disclaimer. There isn't a commitment that we'll be delivering this technology. It is strictly a tech preview that we're sharing with you today. So let me give you a quick overview of what we'll be doing. We will leave some time at the end for Q&A, but initially we'll give a quick overview of what we're thinking of delivering for the DR service for VMware Cloud on AWS. What we're looking at delivering, what our thought process is, and then we'll go through some demos, some walkthroughs of some of the enhancements that we'd be looking to make compared to what you may be familiar with our existing portfolio of technologies. So it's going to be the running order. Let's start off with the overview. And really, there's a couple of key things I want to cover. Just very quickly, what is VMware Cloud on AWS? I'll give a quick overview of that, and then we'll talk about what we're working on for VMware Cloud on AWS for disaster recovery specifically. So just very quickly, what we have here with VMware Cloud on AWS, we're really looking at taking the power of the SDDC, the operational familiarity of the SDDC, and being able to couple that with the global presence and elasticity and scalability of the Amazon Web Services infrastructure. So really this is bringing the best of both worlds, taking that vSphere environment, that vSAN, NSX capabilities that are really delivering value for you today within your own on-premises environment, and being able to deliver that to you very simply, very easily as a service. This is a managed SDDC stack running on top of AWS, so you're getting the full stack, you're getting vCenter, vSphere, NSX, vSAN, those capabilities. But you also have full access to vCenter. We expose the APIs, the UI. You can go in and access that directly. We're not putting an intermediate layer in the way of that. But then also, one thing that is different is that we take care of the management of the life cycle of this SDDC stack for you, right the way from hardware all the way through to the software that's running on top of it to deliver this service. Thing here is a consistent operational model, and this is really enabling the hybrid cloud. And this is particularly interesting when we talk about disaster recovery, because one of the things when I talk about disaster recovery with customers, one of the things that they really like is having that the ability when they do a failover to be failing over to an environment that's familiar. A lot of DR solutions that customers have been looking at, they operate one way on premises with they have vSphere, vCenter, they're used to managing it that way. They have the operational processes really optimized for that. But then when they look at disaster recovery, unfortunately, sometimes they have to make decisions to have DR to an environment that looks nothing like the on-premises environment. And in terms of management, in terms of capabilities, and so on. And so when as you can imagine, when you're in a disaster scenario and you're having to do that disaster recovery, that's absolutely the worst time for you to have operational inconsistencies. You want everything to be smooth and familiar for you as you're going through that really difficult process of DR and getting things back up and running. And the other thing that we're enabling with VMware Cloud on AWS is really being able to leverage the cloud economics, being able to take the ability to have elasticity, be able to spin up additional capacity on demand, and being able to couple that with that vSphere environment, that vSAN, and so on that you're familiar with.
Yeah, so tying into what Ben was just talking about, the way that we wanted to do that is using things like Site Recovery Manager and vSphere Replication. Again, tools that if you've done anything with disaster recovery with VMware, you're familiar with, you have experience with, and that integrate really well with what VMware is already doing and what we're planning on doing with VMC on AWS. So this is taking tools, if you're not familiar with Site Recovery Manager and vSphere Replication, those are VMware's orchestration and automation and replication solutions for the virtualized data center. So tools that are designed to make disaster recovery operations easier, repeatable, testable non-disruptively, all of those functionalities that you get with Site Recovery Manager, making that available in the VMC on AWS context. And the added benefit that we have here is we have the platform of AWS gives us the opportunity to have the potential to do some new and interesting things from a disaster recovery standpoint. There's not a whole lot that we can get into detail about that right now, but leave it to your imagination for the ways that with an SDDC on AWS, how could you take advantage of those features and services that AWS offers through VMware. So one of the things that we've done, that we're looking at doing, that we're planning on doing around Site Recovery Manager and vSphere Replication in particular, is how do we make that work better in the context of disaster recovery as a service? And one of the big challenges that Site Recovery Manager in its current iteration has is version interoperability. So we want the flexibility of being able to upgrade and change things on the VMC side and not have the customer have to change things on their end. So be able to iterate frequently on the VMC side, make upgrades, make changes to that code, and not require any changes on the customer end of things. In addition, having some flexibility in terms of vCenter versions. So if right now you're running on the latest version on VMC, but on your site, we want to give you the flexibility of maybe being one or more versions back in terms of vCenter. So having some flexibility in terms of that versioning to make that whole process more cloudy, if you want to say, or just more flexible. The other thing is from a UI standpoint, and I'm going to zoom ahead to a slide that's got a bit more clarity in this, and we're going to go into a lot more detail. We've got some demos and stuff highlighting this, but the idea here is that we rebuilt the entire UI, rebuilt a whole new UI. It's all based on HTML5, no Flash in there at all. Everything is based on the Clarity spec that VMware has created. So all of it ties in with the rest of the UIs throughout the whole VMware environment. The whole VMC on AWS is all built on that idea as well. And in addition to improving the looks of things and the functionality, we've also done a lot from a workflow standpoint. And we'll get into this in some of the demos that we've got for you, but doing things to make it so that it's not just that we've taken the existing UI and ported it into HTML5. We've looked at it, tried to see, are there places where that we could improve it, and are there places where we could continue to improve it, and made some of those changes, workflow improvements, things like that. Anything else you can think to add to that, Ben?
No, I think you've done a really good job of that, GS. I think that's the key message is as we're looking to how we can deliver a disaster recovery service, just make it a lot simpler for customers, both operationally in terms of the deployment that you covered, so that we don't have to do the big bang upgrades of upgrading both sites at the same times to the same versions and handling all that. A lot more flexibility in the coupling. And then on the user interface, as GS mentioned, just really focusing on how can we make it a lot simpler for customers, how can we make it faster for customers to get up and running, and really get that model of delivering it as a service so that they're able to go from not having any DR protection to be able to protect the first VM just really quickly.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Ben. So first demo that I'm going to show is getting into simple deployment of the DR service. And actually, hand that over to Ben.
Sure.
You can walk through that one for me.
No worries. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, we have what's called the VMware Cloud and AWS console. And one of the things that we're looking at adding to that console is the ability to very quickly, once I've provisioned a software-defined data center on VMware Cloud and AWS, being able to come here, and I'll just zoom in a little bit here, and be able to add in what we call add-ons into this environment. So the concept here is that you have your SDDC deployed, and now you say, hey, I really want to use this as a DR target. Maybe I've got a few dev test workloads already running in it and so on, but I want to be able to turn on this capability here. So we can just come in, we can go down, and we can click on the activate button down there. And now kick off the process. When that process has been completed, what we'll have is a fully deployed DR endpoint. So both if you're familiar with the vSphere application and SRM aspects of this, we'll have taken care of deploying that vSphere application endpoint, the appliance, as well as the SRM appliance as well. And so these are basically taking those Photon-based appliances and we would be making them available within VMware Cloud on AWS. And then here, you can see once I've done that, I have a couple of links here. The first one here to be able to go and open the SRM UI directly, to be able to get very quick access to that. I'll also be able to get to that via the vSphere UI as well that's available within VMware Cloud and AWS. And then I also have a link to be able to download the on-premises components as well and be able to take those and deploy them into the environment.
Now, Ben, did I hear correctly? Did you say something about an appliance for SRM?
An appliance for SRM?
Yeah.
You mean when I was talking about Photon-based deployments?
Yeah, I thought I heard you say something about that.
You may have heard something like that, but this is something that we're working on, and I'll refer you to the earlier disclaimer.
Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at deploying the on-premises components. So the idea here is that same UI that Ben was just showing. There's that link where we can download those on-premises components, go through, download those. And here we're looking at just standard deployment of vSphere application and Site Recovery Manager. If you're familiar with those, if you're not familiar, it's the kind of thing that standard OBF deployment, really easy to get set up, installed, and configured. I've got a video online showing getting VR and SRM installed, deployed, and configured in, I think it was just slightly over an hour, and that was doing both sides of this. So in the case for VMC on AWS, we're going to handle the cloud deployment of that. You'd just handle the on-prem, and you'd probably be able to get it stood up in all of about 25 minutes or so. Obviously, you would need, for the on-prem deployment, at this point, you are going to need a Windows server to install SRM on. I would highly recommend, if you're looking to deploy this or deploy SRM in general, using the embedded database. You can use other databases as well, but the embedded database supports the full scale of SRM. So there's really not any, unless you just really like using other databases, there's no real reason to use anything else other than that. You're not going to be looking at doing any kind of SRA deployments or anything because you're using vSphere applications, so you don't have to worry about that. And really, if you've got a Windows server that you're ready to install it on, you should have VR stood up and running, SRM installed and ready to go within about 25 minutes. So the last thing that I'm going to go through before I hand it back to Ben is talking about getting that cross-site pairing set up. So got just a little video here. And So here you see the SRM UI within VMC and AWS, and we're going to select our site and then the PSC on our site, and put in our just standard credentials, usual thing there. Decided not to speed any of this up so you could see it a little bit more in real time. Select the server that you want to pair it with, and then you can see there that we've got the Site Recovery Manager and vSphere application pairing that we're doing at the same time. So instead of having those be two separate processes, we combine that into one process. And there you go, we've got those sites paired. Now we just need to log into it. And that was one of those examples of the ways that we've improved the UI experience. And if you take a look here, you can get some details on those pairings. Just had to blank out that version number because the version doesn't technically exist or whatever. But you can see those details there for both Site Recovery Manager and vSphere application, and how we've done a lot to combine those two UIs to improve the usability and the functionality of that.
And I think that's really one of the, just taking a step back, one of the things that we really were focused on was, for this as a DR service, we know that what we're delivering here is going to be SRM and vSphere replication. We know we want to use VR, but how can we make it easier for customers? So today, there's two separate user interfaces, two separate workflows. What we're doing here is making this a lot more unified across the two. So you saw there a very brief example of how that happens with pairing. We just have to put in the credentials for the vCenter. It discovers the endpoints that we provisioned on VMware Cloud on AWS. You can just choose that. We choose just quickly checking two boxes to say, yes, I want to connect both SRM and VR, and then it's done. The pairing's done. Previously, if you're familiar with it, you would have to go in and you'd first have to install VR on both sites, then go through and do the pairing for those, then the SRM install and pairing separately. So really we're just taking what was two separate operations and really starting to streamline that. And you'll see that as we go through some more of the demos, how we're looking to really optimize the use cases. That's kind of one of the key things that we're working on here. So let's go through and see how we create the inventory mapping. So for those of you who are familiar with from SRM 5.8, we introduced some enhancements to the inventory mapping, and we've been doing some enhancements over time to that. You'll have seen things like subnet mapping and auto matching based on names and things like that. We've really taken a lot of those benefits and brought it across. We're looking to bring that across into the new HTML5 based user interface. So this will be pretty familiar to what you'll have seen before, but let me just show you how quickly this can be done. So what I'm going to do now is just quickly walk you through a demo, and this one was recorded live, of how I can configure my network, folder, and resource mappings between the two sites, and how quickly we can do that with this capability. So here I'm actually I'm just going to pair one network. So I'll choose my CGW network here, and I'll pair it with an equivalent network on the other side. This is just an example of how I would do the manual pairing. So as you see there, I've added a mapping, and now I'm going to add the reverse mapping as well at the same time. So that's pretty quick, and I've also selected my test network as well. So I can also specify my test network when I'm defining this mapping for the first time. Now let's go in and look at the folder mappings. On this demonstration, I'm going to show you how I can use the automatic mapping to really map multiple folders at the same time. So here I've selected the root of two sites, and because the folders are named the same, it's just going to create those mappings for me and discover them. And then I can quickly do the reverse mappings also. And then similarly for the resource pool, I just have one resource pool that I want to map here, so I'm going to do it manually. I just choose my workload resource pool. And I'm very consistent in my naming. It's called the workload resource pool on the other side as well. But you see there that I was just very quickly able to configure all those inventory mappings and determine where things were located on my primary site, where I want to recover them to. And as you can imagine, the VMware Cloud on AWS, the infrastructure may look a little bit different, the way that we have the resource pools initially set up and so on. So you may want to do some of that mapping, but you can see how quick and easy it is to be able to establish that. And this is mostly capabilities that are already there in the SRM client already. We're just showing you in the new updated H5 client that we're working on right now. So, okay, this is great. Isn't infrastructure wonderful? You know, infrastructure is kind of something that we work on day to day. But really, you know, the whole goal of this is to make it easy for us to be able to protect our applications. You know, all of the stuff leading up to this point has all been handling what we do at the infrastructure level. I want to get to the next level and say, okay, how quickly can I go from a VM that is not protected at all? How can I go and get that into a protected state, have that, you know, replicated, added to recovery plans, and so on? You know, what's the process behind that? And what we did, working with our usability team and the UI engineers, we really looked at the workflows that customers were going through, and we also knew that for this in particular, we were leading with vSphere replication initially. So we were looking at how we can optimize that workflow. So let me show you some of our thoughts on that. And really here, it's all around streamlining that workflow, getting it from an unprotected state to a fully protected state as quickly as possible. So here, I'm going to show you how quickly I can do that. And I set myself a goal of doing this in about a minute, and let's see if I was successful. So let's kick this off. So first, this is a new HTML5 base user interface in vSphere. I'm going to go through and find my virtual machines that I want to protect. And I'm going to make this a little bit interesting for myself and choose a few VMs here. So I've got a few marketing VMs. I'm going to multi-select those marketing VMs in the H5 client. I'm going to right-click and bring up the context menu, and I'm going to kick off the protection to the site recovery service. So it's going to open up a new workflow for me. Now, one of the things, because we're looking to support multiple vCenter versions, this is opening it up in a separate SRM-specific UI. But here I can just quickly check, you know, where I want to replicate it to, choose my VR server, and then choose the location that I want to replicate the storage to. So it's kind of like a little internal test environment I have. And then you'll be familiar with this, setting the recovery point objectives, enabling network compression. This is new. So note here, I was doing vSphere replication, but now at this point, I can decide that I wish to add those 3 VMs to a new protection group. So I'm going to actually specify the new protection group at this point. And also I can do this with a recovery plan as well. So I can choose to create a new recovery plan at this time. And then I'll just click through and finish. And you'll see I have my recent task going here as it's starting to kick off the replication. And then it just quickly flashed through, and it's going to have created the recovery plan for me. So that sounds good, but let's go in and validate that. Let's check that it's all configured as we come to expect. So here I can see I have my 3 replications going. They're all doing an initial sync at the moment. I can drill down and see a little bit, you know, how it's progressing, what the configuration was, and so on. Let's look at the protection group. I have the protection group that I created. I can go through. I can see that the 3 VMs have all been successfully added to that protection group and configured. And then the recovery plan, I'll go and drill down to that, and I can see that, yes, that has that marketing protection group. And I can see down here I have 3 VMs ready for recovery. I can go drill down and look here and see that those 3 VMs are all there listed in my recovery plan. And let's now say I want to tweak one of those. So let's choose one of those virtual machines, and let's give it a slightly higher priority. I can just go through and tweak the priority there to increase to have it restart before the other VMs begin restarting. And then as we go and look into the recovery steps, we're able to see now that VM now is being recovered as a priority 2 VM before the priority 3 VMs. So I'm just going to pause for a second. Let's compare and contrast how that compares with the current experience. So particularly using SRM and vSphere replication. So the first thing is, you know, there's 3 key things that we achieved as part of this workflow. The first one, we configured replication. The second one, we added it to the protection group. That's a grouping of VMs that we wish to kind of group together and be able to fail over as a unit. And then the third thing is we added it to a recovery plan. So that enables us to go in, and we could go in, set the recovery priorities. We can set post power on steps and so on. But you know, those 3 things, the replication, adding to a protection group, and adding to a recovery plan, in fact creating new protection groups and new recovery plans. If you think of the old process of how you would do that, you know, first you would go in, you'd select the VMs, you'd kick off the vSphere replication UI and you would configure that. Then you would have to switch contexts. You'd go to the SRM UI, you'd go create a new protection group, a vSphere replication-based one. Then you'd have to have potentially a big list of VMs that you'd have to go search for the VM that you wanted to add to the group. Go find the right ones, add that to the group. Then you would have to switch contexts again, go to the recovery plan screen and go create a recovery plan explicitly and add that protection group that you just created to it. So this is like a variety, kind of ping-ponging between a few different screens. But what we're looking at is we can unify this process, we can really streamline it, and just very quickly, I've got to a position now where my VMs are fully configured for protection, and I could go through and begin testing my recovery plans. I could trigger a plan migration, and when the synchronization is finished, I could trigger a DR failover as well. So let's talk a little bit about that. So some of this is going to be familiar to those of you who are familiar with Site Recovery Manager and how it operates. But I just really wanted to illustrate this because one of the goals that we're working towards is that this DR service is fully bidirectional. That's kind of a key goal for us. This is not something where, hey, it's really easy to fail over into the cloud, but then when you want to fail back, you have to do all kinds of things with like using VM converter or other mechanisms to move back. This is fully bidirectional. So replication in both directions. We can protect to the cloud, reprotect and fail back. We can provision in the cloud and, for those workloads born in VMware Cloud and AWS, protect them back to our on-premises data center as desired. So let's walk through how this looks like in the new UI that we're working on. So here, the goal is that we want to have full support for non-disruptive DR tests, workload migration, disaster recovery, failback, fully bidirectional. We don't want to make any compromises on that. So that's really the goal that we're working towards here. So let's go see how this would work. So here I can see that I have several VMs that were replicated. I have 3 protection groups, and I have a recovery plan. I'm actually going to create a new recovery plan. They were all recovery plans per group of applications. I'm just going to create one for everything, and I'm going to add all of my protection groups to that recovery plan. And then I have my test networks kind of established there. Let's go through and create that recovery plan. You see that will pop up in a second. So I have my all recovery plan. Let's go into that. And what I'm going to do now is actually kick off that recovery plan. This will be familiar to you, but you have the full capabilities, plan migration, disaster recovery. Let's do a plan migration, kick that off, and we'll go have a look at the recovery steps, and we'll see that executing. So you'll see here you'll have the full progress. This will take a few minutes because basically we're having to power on all the VMs. I'll kind of go through the first few steps live, and then when we get to the next few steps, take a few minutes for the VMs to come up, so we'll skip that. But I'll just pause it at this point just to show you kind of the speed of this. So just very quickly, if you look here, we started at kind of 1:30, and then by 1:33, so 3 minutes later, we'd failed over all 3 of the sets of applications. So really the key thing here is just the speed that we can boot the VMs up on recovery. It's kind of the key constraint that we're operating with here. Oh, I shouldn't have paused that. Okay, let's go back. Okay, let's redo this. There we go. Okay, so let's just scrub ahead to the failover, and I think we were kind of at this point, and we'll continue from here. So what we can see here, we've completed the failover. Well, let's just go and we'll open up the target site. So this is just a little internal environment, but you can imagine this will be the HTML5-based user interface within VMware Cloud on AWS when we launch the service. So here, I'm just going to quickly also and see that those VMs now are all powered down, that were on the original location, and they've all been failed over to the the new target site. So I see here on the left that all those VMs are now powered on and functioning. So that's the first step. But now we can actually go through and reprotect those VMs back. So this is the bidirectional capability that we're introducing, or that we support with this service, or we will support with this service. And so here it's just very similar to what you would do on premises today, but you'd be able to just flip it round. We take care of reversing the direction of replication and failing that back over. But the key things to bear in mind, although it's very familiar to you, that's part of the benefit of what we're delivering. It's that operational capability that you're familiar with. Those same capabilities we're bringing to VMware Cloud and AWS. And we're giving it kind of a new user interface, a fresh look, based on the Clarity user experience guidelines. So you see here, I've got the reprotect all completed. And at this point, I'm fully ready to go do another test or another failover. My workloads are running in the cloud, and now they're protected back to my on-premises location. But I think one of the key things I'm hoping you're getting from this session is that as we're working on providing this DR service, we're really building it on those capabilities that you come to expect. So we're not making compromises in terms of that bidirectional capability. That's that's a key goal of what we're looking to deliver. The UI, where it's what you're used to today, it's going to be familiar. The recovery steps that you saw before, the listing of protection groups and recovery plans. But some of the key things that we have been doing is really enhancing it for the new H5 design. So we're really focused on that Clarity UX guidelines. So what you'll see here is really aligned with what we're doing with the H5 vSphere client as well. And I hope you've seen that some of the workflows that we have, things like protecting virtual machines, pairing of virtual machines, even how I could quickly go from replications to protection groups to recovery plans, just using those tabbed interfaces, are a lot more streamlined and intuitive for you. And so we've had a lot of really great feedback on that, but we're certainly open to getting more feedback on that as we develop and evolve this product and this service. So that was really a quick overview of what we're looking to deliver. I'll just talk for a few more minutes, kind of off slide, but what the goal is this DR capability, a completely fresh user interface. Now, how is this different from what you could do on premises today? Well, there's a lot of similarities in all honesty, but what we're delivering is delivering it as a service. So all of those capabilities are now delivered as a service, and it's a managed service provided by VMware. So how is that the target location, being VMware Cloud on AWS, is an environment where we take care of all of the life cycle of the hosts, of the SDDC stack. So when you talk about the ESXi hosts, the vCenter, NSX, vSAN, you get all of that power of the SDDC, but we manage the life cycle of it. You don't have to worry about provisioning hardware, racking, stacking, anything like that. You don't have to take care of updating firmware versions or patching ESXi or anything like that. It's truly delivered as a service, VMware Cloud on AWS. So what we're really doing with the DR piece is really building on top of that foundation. So for those components that we're taking care of, vSphere replication and SRM, we deploy them on your behalf. You just literally have to click that little activate button, and we'll take care of that. We also take care of updating and patching it as well, so you don't have to worry about keeping it up to date. And with the version flexibility that we talked about earlier, we don't have to. You don't have to worry about that. We can keep things up to date. You don't have to be changing your on-premises infrastructure until you're ready to upgrade. Once you upgrade and you have later versions of the product as we would go forward, you get access to the new capabilities, but we still are having that versioned API compatibility so that you don't have to upgrade until you're ready to. And then the version flexibility between the SRM and VR instances and vCenter means that you're then also able to more frequently upgrade the SRM on-premises components as well, without also being forced to upgrade your vCenter server. So that's kind of a really key point that I hear from a lot of customers, is that maybe they really like the new stuff within SRM, but they don't want to upgrade because they have so many other integrations with vCenter that they have to kind of upgrade if they make that move. So we are really looking at that flexibility as we operate as a service. So I think we've gone through some of the key things that we wanted to cover today. We'll open for Q&A in a moment. GS, was there anything else that you wanted to talk to before we have Q&A?
One of the things that I often hear from customers, and to me one of the big advantages of this thing that we're working on, is the challenge of not having a second site for DR. So that interest in having another site but not having it be something that you have to own and operate. So us providing that as a service just removes that one more barrier to DR adoption. And one of the things I've always found fascinating about disaster recovery, I'm not sure what the audience here, what your experience of it is that somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% of businesses don't have a DR plan. Or their DR plan is basically just, fingers crossed and hope everything turns out okay. So just doing something to reduce that barrier a little bit, make it that much easier for someone to have a DR plan, have a disaster recovery, a plan for what they're going to do in place, I think should be really advantageous. So. Before anybody, we're happy to start taking questions. Just one thing really quick is if you are going to leave before then is please fill out your surveys. Especially if you like the session, fill out your survey. If you didn't like the session, just don't fill out your survey. No, really. Either way, we really do appreciate all of the feedback that we get. Trust me, we read all of it. We take it to heart. It goes on our performance evaluations. All of that kind of stuff. So we appreciate you filling out the surveys. But yeah, and the T-shirts. Yeah.
Yes. So because you don't have enough T-shirts at a tech conference, we do have a few boxes of T-shirts for VMware Cloud on AWS. So if anybody wants to pick up another T-shirt, there's several at the front here. Please feel free to go and take some. So I think we'll open up for Q&A now. For those of you who have questions, we have a microphone at the front just so everyone can hear. If you could come here for your question, and we'll take them in turns. So at the front.
So I've got two questions. Number
Certainly.
one, if I'm not currently running NSX on my on-prem cloud,
Yep.
and obviously NSX is just comes with AWS. There's no option there. Mm-hmm. Will this still work? Will it re-IP?
Yes. So you're absolutely right. Having NSX on premises is not a requirement for VMware Cloud on AWS. And as we develop the service, we don't anticipate it being a requirement for this capability either. So we will have the capability to be able to re-IP the virtual machines on failover. However, we are working with our colleagues in the NSBU, the Network and Security Business Unit, who work on NSX, to look at options for enabling things like Layer 2 VPN connectivity and so on, to enable IP portability on failover. So being able to avoid the need for re-IPing.
And lastly, if I'm already doing replication for other applications, and I love me some Zerto or some Recover Point for VMs, mm-hmm. Am I locked into using vSphere replication, or can I use those third-party tools? Because a lot of times those mm-hmm. third-party tools are they have other features and functionality that people are looking for.
Sure. So I'll talk to that. So what we were talking about today is VMware's specific DR service that we're looking to offer as a service. But we are also working with an ecosystem of partners to enable third-party solutions with the VMware Cloud and AWS platform. Those third-party solutions are ones that we're focusing on are those that build upon our partner-documented APIs and are supported with those. So that would be solutions in say, for example, the backup space. building on, say, the vSphere APIs for data protection. On the replication space, those are certified with the vSphere APIs for I/O filtering, VIO. So they're kind of prerequisite. That kind of thing would be a prerequisite for us to be able to support it with VMware Cloud and AWS. I can't share any timelines on specific partners. We've talked about backup. Replication, third-party DR is also an area that we're looking to have an ecosystem around. Unfortunately, I can't share many more details than that in terms of times, but it would be built on our partner programs that we have today. That would be a prerequisite. So things like Recover Point for VMs, for example, is verified with is certified with VIO. They would be a candidate solution that we could look to offer, but it would be those that are certified.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Next question, please.
So DR as a service, if it's marketed as that, is it going to be priced like that? Meaning, am I paying the full boat whether I'm running everything up there, or just replicating the data up there and not running anything up there?
Okay. So pricing and packaging, we're not a place where we can share that right now. I think the initial focus of what we're working on is definitely looking at having VMware Cloud on AWS, having workloads running there as well, being an infrastructure that maybe has some test dev on. You have pilot-like infrastructure like your AD domain controllers.
You'll always have that,
on.
right? But all these stuff that's not running, right? Is it full ride? Is that the thought?
I really can't get into the details on that, but it's still to be determined. But the idea would be you would have VMware Cloud on AWS, and you would pay for the resources there, and the DR would be something on top of that for the orchestration layer. But that's just initial ideas. It could change. Who knows what it's going to be. But we're looking at different options as well, both for what we're going to deliver or looking to deliver initially, and then looking at longer term how we can have other replication capabilities that could target other storage types potentially with different economics. But that's all the stuff that we're working on. I honestly, if you're under NDA, feel free to hit me up afterwards and we can talk in more detail. So thanks.
So this may be something that I'm not sure you can answer, but meaning NDA and all those kinds of things. But I'm just curious, considering that vSAN and NSX are configured with a policy-driven model, is that something that you've considered doing for SRM and potentially DR as a service?
Yeah, I think one of my you're right that I can't go into too much detail on that, but one of my I've worked for VMware for about 5 years now in the storage and availability business unit, and one of my responsibilities in that time was storage policy-based management. I was the PM for that, so definitely we can see the value of using the policy-based approach, both for configuring at the storage layer with vSAN, but also at the data services layer. So if you've seen what we've done with vSphere APIs for I/O filtering, for example, that's all policy-driven using storage policy-based management. It's an area that I can't talk to specifically at this time, but it's definitely an area that we look at. We look at how we can bring some of these data service capabilities into the storage policy-based framework. There's a lot of potential goodness from that, but we don't have anything concrete that we can share at this time, I'm afraid.
And
thank you.
Yeah, it's not specific to VMC on AWS, but if you've seen what we've done with storage policy-based protection groups with Site Recovery Manager, we've done some work in that space, and it's something that we continue to work on. So.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jess. Thank you.
So I guess what's the RPO with vSphere replication?
So the current RPOs that we support with vSphere replication, the most aggressive is about 5 minutes. It can be configured down to 5-minute RPO, up to 24 hours.
Will this be any better? Or?
So I would use your guideline as what we currently support. That's something that we always look at, evaluating what we want to do on the replication technology side. It's not something we're specifically talking about at this time now.
And then how far is this ready for production today?
Can't talk dates.
If it was ready for production today, I was hoping we'd get on the main stage and be part of that. So the question is, just quickly though, what kind of RPO would you be looking for, like, ideally? Okay, so just
Near zero, yeah.
okay, cool.
Hi, a nice presentation. Appreciated that. First of all, yeah, I would be interested to know, like, is this solution specific to vSAN, or is it can be extended for other storage vendors as well? Like, I'm interested in SRA, right, fitting in here for other storage vendors.
Yeah, so vSphere replication, which is the replication engine that we use for, or we plan to use for this service, is storage agnostic. So it's within VMC on AWS, that storage is vSAN.
Okay.
But the storage on your site could be anything. It can be anything from local storage to vSAN to any storage array, NFS, iSCSI, block. It doesn't matter. As long as the storage is supported by VMware, vSphere replication can replicate from it.
What you mean to say is, if I have a SRA in the stack, all right?
So there's no, and the thing with vSphere replication is it doesn't require an SRA.
Okay, it doesn't require it.
Yeah.
But if you have an SRA, this is not the solution for it?
If you want array-based replication, that's not something that we're planning on offering, at least initially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to elaborate on that a little bit, there'd be a few challenges if we were to do that. The way that I'd enumerate them, the first one is, we're looking at this being a service that we can offer and manage ourselves. That means we're responsible for the patching and the life cycle of things like the SRM appliance. And it's also an appliance, it's a Linux-based system. So if you're familiar with the SRAs, they're provided by the vendors, and typically Windows installable solutions. So that's two of the key things we'd have. If we were to enable that, we'd have to solve that. The first one would be making sure that we could have an SRA that would support Linux, which isn't the plan for this right now. And then also how we would handle the life cycle of that, because we want to be able to iterate and patch SRM, upgrade SRM, kind of on our schedule. If we then introduce third-party dependencies on that piece, it really complicates the life cycle management. And then the third thing is also, while we are looking to have an ecosystem of storage solutions within VMC on AWS, right now vSAN is the primary storage solution. And so array-based replication, it may be something that we look at in the future based on customer demand and input, but it's not something that we have in plan or we're working on right now.
Okay, it's out of the window right now, in case if there are future.
Yes.
Okay. I have a couple of more questions as well. So you talked about RTO, right? It showed about 3 minutes for 3 VMs happening. Is it the same case on the reverse replication as well? From cloud to on-premise, or is it more?
Yeah, so the RTO is really a function of your recovery site infrastructure primarily. Basically, depending on whether you need to do IP customization or not, can add some time to that. And then it's a power on time and what dependencies you have configured and so on. A key thing to look at is what the target here in VMware Cloud and AWS is basically like an all-flash vSAN cluster in the cloud. So from a performance perspective, the storage is actually very performant. It's built out of local NVMe devices. So the power on time actually would probably be even faster than what I was showing you here. This was my small environment.
Okay.
On VMC on AWS, depending on the workloads and so on, it can power those up very quickly. And the infrastructure side of things is pretty well sized. Compared to most customers, particularly those that haven't moved to all flash arrays yet, you'd see much better recovery times going to the cloud. Recovering in your own infrastructure is going to depend on your infrastructure. How quickly it can spin up those VMs.
But we can expect when replication happening on the cloud, relatively more time when happening on the reverse. Is that right?
So the recovery times will be, depending on the infrastructure, they would typically be faster for most customers on the cloud than back to on-premises.
Okay. But is there going to be a policy-based model also based on the RTO will depend as well?
So the RPO, what the customer can do, they can, as we showed in the workflow, the customer went through and they could choose the target RPO for their workloads.
No, I'm talking about RTO.
Oh, RTO.
Recovery time objective.
So the recovery time objective really The way that you control that is via the recovery plan. So if you want things to recover quick, early, you'd put them at the beginning of the recovery plan. Okay. And then we'll spin those up first. They'll get first access to the resources. And then as you get through to priority 2, 3, 4, and 5 VMs, they'll come up later. They'll be powered on after we've successfully booted the previous groups. Okay. So you have that level of control. The way that you validate that and test that, we provide a testing facility so you can get a good sense of how quickly things would recover before actually having to perform the recovery using the non-disruptive testing capability.
Okay. Thank you. One last question.
Can we just hold it a second, because the gentleman behind you have a few, so if we could just let them have an opportunity and then we'll come back. Yeah. Or we can talk afterwards if that's okay. That's one, they've been waiting patiently, I just want to give them an opportunity. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm sorry if this is more of a generic, an SRM question than the cloud, but we're headed that direction. But the last time I had a good look at SRM, one of our criticisms or concerns about it is we have 100 different applications that are running on our environment from tier 2 to tier 5, and we pretty much put it on the BO to come up with their DR plans, and we want to be able to offer them something like SRM. But some of these applications, I would say, are brittle, like BMC and business intelligence stuff. We've had problems with the DR plan. So is this any better than what it was a couple of years ago in terms of being able to manage a complex application that has 20 plus servers involved in it?
Well,
and they're all on Windows, unfortunately.
Yeah, SRM is designed to recover whatever level of application. Like Ben was mentioning, we have 5 priority groups that you have within a recovery plan that you can organize VMs in. And then within those priority groups, you can define dependencies. So you can, down to whatever level of granularity, define how you want those VMs to start up. Okay. If you have scripts that need to run as part of powering on that application, that's something that can happen either from the SRM server.
So there's that's one of the
and this is again, and right now I'm speaking specific to site recovery management.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just thinking.
Yeah. So I would say yes. Long story short, yes.
Are you looking into any enhancements or changes in portability between SRM instances? So we have, an on-prem SRM today that goes to 2 on-prem sites, maybe, 40 protection groups and 100 recovery plans. Right. Any kind of enhancements or changes to portability between versions so that we wouldn't have to recreate?
That's definitely something we're working on.
Good. So can I just drill down into that a little bit? When you say portability, are you talking about between different SRM pairings or different versions? Or
so if I have a 5.8 deployment of 2 sites, and I want to go to site 3 and then cloud as a target, could I just grab all the plans and do sort of an automated feed into it? Just a nice enhancement.
So kind of being able to export it, re-import, and okay.
Exactly. Yep. Just found the need in the past and
we've definitely heard that one.
Sure.
Fairly frequently. So.
Good. And kudos on the HTML5. It seems much better.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
It's this guy here actually. He's
right here.
Yep. How you doing? You said this is a DR as a service. I was wondering if you had a disaster, is there a critical response team that would help a customer in event of a failure when they had to get everything up running pretty quickly?
Sure. So I think there's probably going to be a few different ways that this gets consumed. I think what VMware is offering is primarily the technology and support for the technology as a service. Probably for that level of engagement, we partner with some of some of our other partners who could maybe build on provide that level of service on top of the technology capability that we have. So probably from our perspective, if there's an issue with the SRM or the recovery or there's an issue there, that's where our support services would come in, would help. If you're looking for someone to help with the design of a disaster recovery plan and things like that, we have professional services teams and our partners have professional services that could help with that. If you're looking at this being a service where you can have a more, a fully managed service with like critical response teams and the like that you were saying. There's certainly a lot of our partners who've expressed interest to us about building that level of service on top of this technology. It may not be something that we offer directly ourselves.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we just have like a few minutes left before they kick us out of the room. If there's any final questions, either come up to the mic now, or me and Jess will be at the front. You can come chat with us. We also have 2 boxes of T-shirts at the front. We have a variety of different sizes. Please feel free to help yourself. And thank you so much for attending.
Yeah, thanks again.